Welcome to the Smokin Rope Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Basore, as always, and today is episode 46. 46 straight weeks. We're nearing that 52 week mark. Real excited about it. And today we have on the show my good buddy and attorney, and among other things, Bob Baldori. Bob, thanks for being on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yep. Looking forward to it. Kevin, what's going on over there? Kevin's with us today at Truu Cannabis down here in Lansing with me, and we're wearing our matching Real Leaf Solutions hats, even though Real Leaf Tom is not able to make it today. So, what's up, Kevin?
Not much. Super excited to have Bob on. I heard some really good stories that I'd love to hear from him personally. Like you said, a big shout out to Tom over at Relief. He sent us our care packages. I got my Blaze on rolling tray. Got myself a little oney bat from him and a little grinder. Some pretty cool swag for Tom to send down. So super excited. Thanks, Bob, for being on the show, and yeah, excited to hear some of the stories. So let's get right into it.
Here's my Real Leaf tray. So it's a little bit full.
That looks way better than mine.
Bob, I was funny. I was thinking about all the things I would call you and introduce. And normally it's a couple things, but I guess I'll get into it. So, Bob's an attorney at law. He's a drug raid winner, I would say. Front man for the Woolies, harmonica and piano player for Chuck Barry, award-winning documentary filmmaker. Had an off-Broadway show at Times Square for months that was very well reviewed. And then also some of the stuff I've enjoyed the most is the behind-the-scenes political strategist. People not familiar with our area don't know kind of like some of the stuff that goes on. So I first met Bob. It was in early 2011 after I had gotten raided by the feds and we got introduced. And he had, and thought actually it was our friend Robin, said you need to meet Bob and talk to him. So at that point, Bob jumped in on my federal case and guided me and really helped out. Got the right attorneys and did a lot and looked out for me. And then, after my second raid, I had to stop growing and stop selling everything. So that's when I got on board with Bob and we did his Boogie Stomp documentary, and we took it to 3 theaters and had it shown and sold out in Lansing. It was a big success, so I was excited about that. And then Bob came down to visit me in prison. Always appreciated that. And when I got out, I went to work for Bob for 6 months when I was in the halfway house and at home. So it's a pretty cool situation when you're sitting there just out of prison and, people like Frank Kelly come over to have coffee in the morning to talk, and you get all this crazy knowledge and all these just incredible people coming through. But after I got off of probation, Bob and I always stayed close. And then we got together really early on the Dana Nessel campaign and had a big fundraiser at his house that kind of shocked the Democratic Party, and that's always a fun story. And Bob always talked about catching lightning in a bottle, like he did with the Woolies, and I felt like we did that there with what's happened. But since then, so many stories, and really fortunate I get together with Bob and I get to hang out with people like Judge Giddings and Bruce Ashley at the local coffee shop and just listen to these guys tell stories. So with that, I want to ask Bob, tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up, what brought you to Okemos, a little bit about the Woolies and Chuck Barry, then we'll get into the Sinclair case. So normally we talk a lot back and forth, but I kind of just want to hear some of these stories. So go for it, Bob.
Where's my hat? I didn't know hats were involved, right? Wouldn't have agreed to go on until I got one.
Beller will send you one.
I don't know. Where do you want me to start?
I'll just tell us where you grew up, and then what got you into, I'd say where you grew up, came to Okemos and Michigan State, and then how it worked out with the Woolies and Chuck Barry. And then I'd love to hear about more about Sinclair involvement.
Yeah, I grew up in Dearborn, which back then was a white bread car community. Came up here in the early 60s before most of you were born, and settled in Okemos, and I say ever since then, I've been stuck here like an impacted wisdom tooth. I've been, and I love it here. I think it's a terrific community, one of the best places in the world to live. Although I've spent a lot of time traveling all over the world, not only with Chuck, who I went everywhere from Rio to Vegas to all over the United States. I played real early. When I was in my early 20s, I hooked up with him partly because I was making a little bit of noise with my rock and roll group, the Woolies. We had a hit record with Woody and Love. Chuck and I actually crossed paths on Lake Lansing. Back then, there was this great old roadhouse called the Dells, and it was run by a good friend of mine, Joe Odie, legendary promoter. And the roadhouse had a history of being sort of a middle stop between Chicago and Detroit for all the big bands and great acts. And Joe had booked Chuck Barry in there for a week. Back then he was playing like 6 nights in a row. And if you book Chuck, you get Chuck, and the guitar lock, and the promoter has to provide everything else. That's part of his contract. He has to provide the backup bands and the equipment and everything. And Joe had booked a heavy metal hair band to back Chuck up. And I was there in the front row. The place was packed. The first set was a disaster. And Joe saw me and my group sitting there and came over and on the break and said, "Can you help me out here?" And the next thing I knew, I was in the dressing room with Chuck. And he looked over at us and said, he had his big red Gibson. He said, "When I say this, you say this. When I say this, you say this." And he walked out. He got to the door and turned around and looked at me and he said, "And don't forget, syncopate." I had no idea what he was talking about, but we went out there and we had a great time. We hit it off. It was a great fit. We worked 6 nights with him, and then he asked us in various different ways. It's a long, complicated story, but he asked us to travel with him, and I ended up working with him for 50 years. He recorded an album here in Lansing in my studio. It's called San Francisco Dudes. I don't know how they came up with that title. It should have been Okemos Dudes or Lansing Dudes. And he actually wrote a song. What the heck? There's a song on that album where he actually refers to the Woolies. It's called Festival. And I recorded with him in Chicago at Chess Records. Traveled with him for literally 50 years. He passed away a couple of years ago, and I really miss him a lot. We were good friends. I used to stay at his house, Wentzville, Missouri, and I actually spoke at his funeral in St. Louis at the Pageant Theater. So I could talk for several hours about my adventures with Charles. And I settled in here early on. I put my first recording studio together in the late 60s, and it's still, after, continual upgrades, it's still state of the art. And more recently, I recorded a couple years ago Lucas Holiday and brought him to The Voice. And I've been recording Walter White, a phenomenal jazz trumpet player, traveled among other things with Wynton Marsalis. So we still have an exciting little music production thing going here at Oakcrest. And along the way, I picked up this law degree. That's about 40 years ago. That was because I wrote a show that was played all over in 5 major markets in the Midwest, Grand Rapids, Lansing. We ended up doing in the early 80s, we did the Apollo Theater in Chicago. There was an Apollo there in Lincoln. We had about a 6-month run then there with the show about it. And right after that, I went to law school. People asked me, why did you go to law school? And this was after I'd been doing that show for about 2 years. And my answer was I needed a vacation. So I spent a couple of years going to law school, partly because I was representing one way or another so many people in the music business, and just thought it would be helpful. And I always loved the law. I should have done it when I was 19 or 20, but I picked that up. And since then, I've been splitting my time pretty much between traveling all over the world. I've done 5 tours of Russia with some of the greatest players on the planet. Bob Seeley, legendary, known when he, as the world's greatest stride boogie piano player. And I made the movie, the documentary Boogie Stomp, which was basically operated on 3 levels. It was a biography of Bob and a history of American piano music from the end of the Civil War until it evolved into the forms that it exists in today, which is blues, boogie, stride, rhythm and blues, rock and roll. Those are basically all from the same roots. And we tried to give a little history lesson as well as entertain with some phenomenal performances. And Brian was a big part of us putting that together and putting it on the road. We actually played about 20 film festivals from New York to Seattle to, I just picked this up on my desk. We won, what is this? Let me have a quick look. It's from audience, this is the Audience Choice Award. Let's see how this works. It sort of works.
Yeah, and you got to, I know one of them was Carmel. Clint Eastwood put it on. He's a big fan. You got to meet Jeff Bridges down the one in Arizona, and then
Yep.
also the just the different people, the author of Game of Thrones. Just all these people that you come out of the woodworks, they're Boogie Woogie fans.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a long list. So, and along the way, I sort of accidentally got involved. Well, actually, it goes back to John Sinclair, and that was in the early 60s. John showed up here. We used to have these jams. Actually, they were above Max Bar. And back then, most of these great musicians were playing jazz, not yet rock and roll, but John was a real aficionado of American roots music. I tell everyone he was the first one to bring marijuana to East Lansing. He used to come up here one night a week when they did this jam session with all these great musicians, among them Ron English, who some of you have been around here for a while may know. His dad had Norm English Music Studios. Ron's a legendary guitar player. He still plays all the time in Detroit, and I used to go to those jam sessions at Max Bar, and that's how I met John. That had to be 62 or 3. It was a long time ago. We became good buddies, and that's another whole book. John's father with he got sentenced to 10 years for 2 joints, and did a year or 2 up in Marquette.
It was Marquette.
Yeah, it was in Marquette, and we had a big Free John Sinclair concert in Ann Arbor that John Lennon came to, Stevie Wonder, Bob Seger. I mean, the lineup was incredible. In fact, they made a documentary that I represented of that entire show, and eventually John was released. I like to tell people this was a case called People v. Sinclair.
Yep, I've heard you say this a few times.
What's that?
I said I've heard you say this a few times.
Yeah, I like to bring it up to municipal meetings. This case, the Supreme Court decided, the Supreme Court of the state of Michigan, in a unanimous decision, stated in this case that, let's see if I can remember the quotes in my notes. When they stated that the harm to society from prohibition is worse than the harm from use. And that was based on a number of scientific studies. And they also declared that it was in this decision that it was less harmful than tobacco or alcohol, and that there was no rational basis for criminalizing it. This is in 1973.
Yeah.
And you can go look up that decision. It's still the law here in Michigan. And for a brief period, marijuana was actually legal because, and then the legislature jumped right on it and, put in place the prohibitions that we're still fighting. We're still fighting. I mean, it's been a major improvement, but there was a period in the 80s where we thought everyone was optimistic about decriminalization, and I was on the front lines. I was a member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the early versions of NORML, with Keith Truu and John, and everyone thought it was headed in the right direction, and then the Nixon and Reagan administrations totally reversed the progress we were making, mainly because they wanted to take African Americans off the voting rolls, and that's all well documented too. It's essentially a racist policy, and they branded and demonized marijuana for that reason, and that's why a lot of people today are still paranoid and basically delusional about the effects, and they don't realize that they've been somewhat brainwashed by what were essentially racist policies.
Yeah, even some of our Meridian Township officials.
Yeah, they're totally delusional. Yeah, they're trying to maintain positions that actually have all these unintended consequences. Like,
Cool.
they have people getting on and complaining about the children, one of the oldest. It's like, what's that line about? It's like the last refuge of scoundrels. It's like,
Yeah.
it's pretty well known that if you decriminalize or legalize marijuana, the use goes down for kids, not up. So, they're actually working against themselves. My kids both went to Openness High School, and from the minute they walked in there, it was easier to get marijuana than it was alcohol or tobacco, and it still is to this day. And I know that for a bunch of reasons, because over the years I've defended high school kids in East Lansing and Openness for possession joints. And the best way to lower use among kids, which nobody wants, is to educate them properly, and decriminalizing it helps, doesn't it? But anyway,
Hey Bob, I'm gonna jump in. Kevin's got a quick question. I know he's itching to ask.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, you've done a ton of work advocating over the years. I know it's been slow progress. It's kind of like, taking small bites of the apple at a time to finally get to the core. What is it like to see the progress that has been made, and what was the emotions like finally seeing a medical bill get passed and a recreational adult use bill get passed? These prohibitions being lifted that you fought so many years to have done. It just must feel great for you. Maybe you could put it into words for me.
Yeah, well, it's sort of PTSD in a way, because for years, you couldn't have an ounce of marijuana on your desk, and I'm still, after, even though it's legal and what a great deal, you can put a plant in your backyard, but you're still looking for the helicopters.
Yeah, totally.
Because you've been so, traumatized by these outrageous, ridiculous laws, and you also feel like you're getting away with something. And it's not enough. I mean, these laws are complicated. I am defending tomorrow in Clinton County someone that's being charged with possession with intent to deliver marijuana. And
Wow.
It's like nuts I mean, it's like the world hasn't caught up with reality, and the prosecutor is a good person, and somewhat. The real reason we're in court over this is because there's these metro squads that I believe get grants from the government and have to justify it. So they're doing these prosecutions where I'm saying to the prosecutor and the judge, if you manage to convict my defendant, I can get it expunged tomorrow. So what are we doing here? Why are we here wasting
That's a good one.
money?
That's a good one, Bob. I was gonna say, hey, I would love this. That's a good segue. You talk about the PTSD. I pretend I don't have it, but it does hit, and a lot of people don't know that we do around mid-Michigan and in your generation about what happened with your raid, and your kind of adventures from there, and how you came back. You just talked about Metro Squad and what ended up happening.
Well, I could write 3 books on that adventure. I call it a great adventure, and it's really so complicated, Ryan. It's hard to. I don't mind talking about it, but it's difficult because every nuance of it requires explanation that are somewhat legalistic. I mean, the gist of it was they sent a good friend of mine who I hadn't been in touch with for a while, but he moved to Colorado for a while, came back to Michigan. He'd been dealing marijuana out there. I didn't know about that. He got busted on a deal in Memphis, or Arkansas, Nashville. And he was facing 40 years to life for the deal. I had no clue about any of this. And he was an old friend. He came back to town. He asked me. We had actually been in the music business together. And I was about to go on vacation to Acapulco, which my wife and I used to do every year. And he asked me if he could use the studio while I was gone, and I said sure. And then the night before I left, he said, I got to come over tonight. And I said, why? I'm packing and getting ready to go. He had a key, and he said, no, I got to stop by. And I said, well, whatever, I'm working here. So he came in the back door. I have a sort of a compound with 2 garbage bags with about 80 pounds of marijuana, and put him down and left. And 2 minutes later, the doors came off, and 35 armed to the teeth hooligans and with face masks and guns, and they knocked the door off, threw me on the floor. I'm looking up at a 20-something kid with a gun to my head saying, don't move, motherfucker, I'm gonna blow your head off. And I'm going, whoa. Calm down. I'm telling him to calm down. And I'm looking up at the girl with a gun, and if he makes a mistake, and it goes on and on. But the short version is, it was government marijuana. They sent him into their own marijuana. He was gonna testify, basically that I ordered it or something to that effect. But it gets so complicated after that. The end result was everything was thrown out. All the charges were dismissed. It took 2 years. The gory details,
Maybe you could just touch a tiny bit on maybe deciding to leave the country and coming back and thrown in a maximum security prison, and then
every one of those is a story. I mean,
I know.
They had me handcuffed to a chair and told me to get an attorney and meet with him. My attorney, that's a complicated story. I don't really want to get into, but basically he sent me in to try to get me to make a deal like the previous guy. That's how they make their money. They roll one defendant. I have so many stories about that. They roll one defendant into the next by scaring the crap out of them and tell them they're going to lose their license, go to federal prison for 10 years. Back then that was possible. But basically they hadn't charged me, and they tried to talk me into working with them, and I just listened to everything and said, I'll think about it. And they expected me to come in and sign some deal to make these phony charges go away. Instead, my wife and I got on a plane and flew to London. And then it became headlines for a year. I mean, this was 30 years ago. It's a whole generation ago. I've lived a whole lifetime since then. And for some reason, just like the record Boogie Allowed, it has this staying power. I mean, people are still talking about it and asking me about it, and I've like totally forgotten it for the most part. And then I'll be walking through Myers and someone will come up to me and say, I love what you did. Or they'll hire me because of that. It's like,
no, that's
in history. I'm moving on. I moved on 30 years ago.
I hear you, but it's a trip to think about, you know. I'm sure as it gets even more and more years out, you know, like there's right now you're doing work as an attorney, criminal defense, you mentioned, but then you've been at the forefront of you know, the cannabis law and understanding it and helping the businesses too. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? There's a lot as far as the work you're doing. I don't want to speak for you on all that, but I know you're involved with some great companies in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, well, you know, I was on the front lines for 40 years when it was really tough work. And, you know, you're still walking into courtrooms where they're so retarded. Like I said, I'm litigating one tomorrow. A year ago, I litigated one in Ann Arbor, of all places. It's, you know, guy, somebody who did 100 pounds, moved 100 pounds from one place to another, and I tried to explain to the judge that I'm involved with, I got 100 clients in the legal cannabis business that are moving 100 pounds in a day or a week legally through their stores, and they're trying to put this guy in jail. You know, it makes zero sense, but
You got him a 7411 though. That was nice.
so I've got yeah, we had that thing eventually dismissed, but along the way, now that it's become, it hasn't been, you know, a silver bullet. It's been one step at a time, starting in 2008, and the laws are so complicated and overlapping. They're still either busting people or preventing them from opening, you know, businesses from, you know, in all the ways you can open them: growing, processing, retail. And it's a hodgepodge of laws that still need to be straightened out. But I'm on, you know, partly because of my experience in the business, and partly because of my relationship. As Ryan stated earlier, we were the first ones to organize and get behind AMS when everybody thought it was a long shot, highly unlikely. And she's a force of nature, and I'm on her advisory. I was part of a transition team and on her advisory board for marijuana policy. And although that's a difficult, you know, the legislature's still mucking around and doing things backwards and doing things up and down, but it provides a tremendous opportunity for certain entrepreneurs and for people in the legal business that understand the law and can deliver licenses for people legitimately, although it's a constant battle to interpret and tweak the laws that do exist. As a result, I'm involved with dozens of legal businesses that are doing literally millions of dollars worth of business right now. I think it's sort of the Wild West, and I think it might even out in 5 or 10 years, but it's a tremendous opportunity for people, especially now that they've streamlined, partly through my efforts and Ryan's and a lot of other people, they've streamlined the expungement process. I used to say, I was advising, darn, I'm not going to remember his name, but after the last election, Gretchen, who I'm also good friends with, was part of her campaign. I tell people I've known her since before she was born because I used to do business with her dad before she was born. Dick Whitmer, another great guy. But she sent her man in charge of marijuana policy over to see me early in her administration, and he was looking for bullet points, how what they should do policy wise. And I told him one of the first things they should do is when they're qualifying applicants, they should make sure they shouldn't let anybody get a license that didn't already have a conviction for marijuana, a marijuana conviction in their history. And he was like stunned. And I said, they're the most qualified people. They're the ones that have been doing it the longest. And, they've been victimized by these laws. And I had him, and I said early on in this, and I said, besides, they're in the initial stages 10 years ago, they were behind most of the businesses. They just couldn't put their names on because of the criminal history. And I had him agreeing with me before I left the room, but it's still, and they've come around, as you know, with your redemption and social equity issues. That's a big step forward, but they still got a long way to go. It's not like they're there.
I know we talk a lot about it, Bob, and on this show with a lot of us that have been doing this for 10 years or 12. So that's our perspective. We'd love to hear the farther back, but it is a lot. We got a lot of battles, and we're doing a lot, but it's nice doing it now, not under the threat of every day wondering if your door's getting kicked in, if things are gonna get taken, and I was just reliving when you were talking about the barrel that you're at. I was reliving that a few times with it made me think about, I don't think about it that often, but it definitely relived that in my head. So it's just, it's beautiful that we've gotten here, and super thankful for all that you've done. Not everybody knows it. You're very modest about it, but tell us about a little bit about what it's like. I'll put you on the spot here. What it's like. Your son could have kind of gotten a job at any blue blood law firm, and worked as with the Supreme Court, and now he's with Baldori Law. So what has that been like now, working with your son?
Pain in the butt. No, he's a great kid. A terrific legal scholar. That he graduated from U of M Law a couple of years ago, and then he clerked for the Kavanaugh, which is appellate, but it's a super education. He's a terrific researcher. He also interned with Jeff Feiger for a summer, and that was an education.
Yep, and lived down with John Sinclair when he was doing that in the same building.
That's a whole other story. Yeah, what a coincidence. John's living in a Victoria mansion in Peterborough that was owned by a client of mine, Joel Landy, who's another legend. He was the mayor of Midtown, and he went down there 40, 50 years ago when it was the Cass Quarter, and a dangerous place to be, and he developed literally 50 properties down there. One of them was this. And he went down there with John. They were old friends, and John was struggling at the time, and Joel gave him the second floor of this mansion right off Woodward. And then Marcus went down there partly to work with one summer with Feiger, and then the next summer with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and eventually the Detroit law office. And I told Joel that Marcus needed a place to crash when he was in town, so he put him on the third floor. So Marcus was living upstairs from John. What a coincidence that is. And they become good buddies. John's still there. Marcus has a place up here. Goes down and visits once in a while. But he's an expert on marijuana law now. I can turn files over to him. Mainly the application process and getting people licenses, but we're also entrepreneurs. We put because we get so much traffic, we put investors together with entrepreneurs that need financing. We put several deals together where the skill sets matched up. People are looking for help in certain areas. So it's really been fun. And working with it has been fun, although my goal is to turn the whole thing from the hand and hit the road, playing boogie woogie. That's the overall.
Yeah. So what's next, Bob? As far as like, I know you're feeling great. You're looking forward to the future. What are your plans here in the next 5 years with that? And then like, so I was meaning to ask you that actually. When are you going to be playing again? And I got a fundraiser I think I want you to do.
Well, we were locked down for the last year and a half, and the venues that I play book a year out, and they're just starting to book. So most of them are a year off, but I've also got an offer right now to open up in Times Square again in Broadway in July. I'm not sure we're going to pull that off because it's too short of a lead time.
Yeah, no
I've
kidding.
got a New York producer that's trying to get live shows up in Manhattan for the summer because the big shows can't open up for 6 months to a year.
That might be actually might be a nice angle to get seen.
Yeah,
There.
he's got a theater there. Danny Wise, the New York
Yep.
producer, he's a classic character, but he's been calling me saying we got to put this together. And Arthur lives in New York now. Arthur Migliazza is one of the incredible piano players I've been touring the world with. I mentioned we did Russia 5 times in the last 10 years. That's closed down a little bit, but I don't think we'll be back there for a few years. But we played everywhere from Moscow to Vladivostok. We played sold Tchaikovsky Hall in Moscow, sold it out a couple of times, and so we backed up the Moiseyev Ballet, which is a phenomenal ballet troupe that's in residence at Tchaikovsky Hall, and there's a video of that somewhere on YouTube, or you can get to it at boogiestomp.com, right? A website that sort of documents what I've been doing with the 2 piano touring I've been doing. So boogiestomp.com. We're going to fire all that up. You asked about the future. One way or another, I'm going to start putting the show up again, and there may be a way to get up here in Michigan this summer, but we need more lead time. I mean, that's the biggest problem is to do it properly. You need 6 months to a year lead time. So I'm starting to build, but most of the stuff I'm looking at is 6 months to a year out.
Sweet. Yeah, I can't wait for you to be playing again in Lansing and Arthur to come back. Well, I mean, yeah, we could talk for hours, and I know you got a meeting coming up, and so do we. But I wanted to give a chance here. Kevin, who me and him obviously a little different show today. We did a lot more listening, and I'm glad we got this all on record. So, but Kevin, any final thoughts for Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when you guys were talking about raids, Ryan, you brought it up again. I was also involved in a raid, had guns put to my head. And like you said, I don't really think about it a lot, but there was definitely some PTSD involved with that whole situation, and I can totally relate with you guys on that whole deal. But Bob, I want to thank you for all that you've done for the music community and for the marijuana community over the years. Ryan and I talk a lot about standing on the shoulders of those that came before us, and we're definitely standing on your shoulders. You're toting a lot of people's weight right now, and at some point in time, Ryan and I will take over and continue to move this thing forward. And someday, I hope people will stand on our shoulders and continue to progress and fight against the prohibition and the freedoms that you've fought for and that we continue to fight for. So I wish you luck getting out on tour sometime soon, getting back to normalcy and enjoying the summer. So good luck, and thanks, Bob, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks. When do I get my hat?
Yeah, well, Tom Beller was texting me. He's pissed off he missed this. Bob, like just so you know, like a lot of so our show's listened to a lot of industry people, especially in Michigan, and actually there's prisoners in Jackson that listen to it too, which is kind of cool now that they got phones. When me and you were in there, we didn't have them, or at least I didn't. I'd get in a lot of trouble. I'd go up to higher unit. I didn't need that, but what any final thoughts for us you want to tell everybody, or just parting thoughts? Anything?
Well, That's you got to keep up the fight. It's far from over. I tell everybody to use the. I've been doing this for years and pissing people off. The tomato model. When you start treating marijuana like tomatoes, you'll know who to prize. It's no more. 200 or 300 years ago when they first, or 4, whatever it was, they discovered tomatoes here. They were out because they thought they were an illegal substance. It should be as easy to grow and hand out and market marijuana as it is to grow tomatoes.
Yep.
It's no more harmful than that. When we get there, then we can relax.
No, I love it. Definitely heard that one a few times, and maybe we'll see that in 10, 20, 30 years. Everything's going so fast now and so much momentum, but I mean, just thinking about like what you talked about, the 70s you had it, and then with Carter, and there's a couple times it looked like it was going to go legal, and it went so far backwards. So I always say like it's the amount of momentum we have now, like we're keeping we got to keep our foot on the pedal and just keep going, don't let up, because the minute we do.
Right?
Yep.
That's the message. It could go backwards in a heartbeat. There are people that want to keep it Schedule 1 and want to criminalize it all over again.
Yep. No, it's like that's it. When you get momentum, you got to take advantage of it. So that's like what we're doing every day, and I know you're gonna keep going too. We got a lot more projects and trouble to get into as well. So, thanks for being on. Yeah, no, I get to go this time. I wasn't allowed to leave the state last time we did that. So, so no, I'm really thankful for you being on, Bob. Thanks for being such a mentor in so many aspects of my life, and appreciate it. And for everybody that's listening today, listen again. Stories, and there's plenty more. So that's it. Look forward to see everybody next week. Have a good one.